Good day everyone, I am Camille Hisoro and today we will discuss globalization and its ethical challenges. So we all know that ethics arises from yourself, to your family, to the society, as well as to the world. So it is not just an ethics anymore, it is what we call global ethics. So sa lahat ng transactional events, parating magpapakita dyan ng ethical behavior. For example, sa business. Sa business, hindi yan gagana, hindi yan mag-work kung mag-isa ka lang. Kailangan mo ng support system. Andyan yung family mo, andyan yung friends mo, andyan yung peers mo, at iba pang taong alam mong makakatulong sa'yo. Nandyan rin yung mga investors. So ano yung kailangan mong gawin para mananatili yung suporta nila sa'yo? Magkakaroon ka ng constant relationship with them. Ano yung pinaka-root nun? Yun yung pag-a-apply mo ng ethics sa buhay mo. Parating may ethical behavior. Kung kaya't, ang ethics talaga is isa sa tumutulong sa pag-angat ng ekonomiya ng ating bansa. Kung meron mang positive, meron at merong negative ang dala nito sa atin. So yan yung pag-uusapan natin all throughout this presentation, which is called the ethical challenges brought by the globalization. So first, let me define what is globalization is. Globalization. Globalization is a worldwide integration of government policies, culture, social movements, and financial markets through trade and the exchange ideas. So yung ideas na tinutukoy rito, yan na yung government policies ideas, culture ideas, social movements, and financial markets ideas. So lahat ng ideas na yan nag-i-integrate. So, sa math, diba, yung integration means summations. So, paano yun nasa-sum up? Paano yun nag-i-integrate sa mundo natin? Through advancement technology. Meron tayong sa transportation, madali na yung madali na yung exportation ng import ng mga products. So, napakadali na ngayon, nowadays. So, according naman kay Anthony Giddens, ito yung second sentence dito sa presentation. According sa kanya, globalization is also the intensification of worldwide relationships which link distant localities in such a way that local happiness are shaped by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. So sinasabi niya rito na there is now an immediate impact of every event. So every social phenomenon that may happen either in the global level or in the local level, mapaibang bansa man yan or dito sa ating bansa, there will always be effect to each other. So ang pinaka-best example niyan is nung gera nung Ukraine, yung Ukraine and Russia. Sa kadahilan ng yung nag-short sila sa gas kasi hindi ko alam yung tamang term, ginagawa nilang source para maka-create ng bomba, hindi ko alam kung ang tawag, basta ganon. Since ginagamit nila yon, dumating sa point na nag-short sila sa gas. So, yung ini-import papunta rito sa Pilipinas, di kakaunti na lang. Talagang mas mamahal siya. So, kung ano man yung nangyari sa ibang bansa na yon, parating maaapektuhan tayo dahil sila yung source ng ating gas. So, ito yung minimin dito ni Anthony Giddens na parating maaapektuhan ang isang bansa, lalo na kung kaalyansa mo yung ibang bansa na naapektuhan. And vice versa lang yun. So that is globalization. So, because of globalizations, merong constant connectivity of all countries on all events. So, magkakaroon ng domino effect. Meron at merong positive ito, kagaya ng isa to sa mga dahilan kung bakit tumataas ang ekonomiya ng ating bansa. Kagaya ng sabi ni President Marcos, isa sa tumutulong sa ating bansa is yung pag-aalyansa sa ibang bansa. For example, isa sa bansa na nakipag-alyansa, tayo ang nakipag-alyansa is ang sa Amerika, sa USA. And isa pa sa example is during pandemic. Isa sa tumulong sa atin upang makabangon tayo, upang magkaroon tayo ng financial financial assistance, yung mga ayuda, is tumulong sa atin yung iba't ibang bansa. Tumulong, pero utang yon. Kaya nga malaki yung utang ng bansa ng Pilipinas. Malaki. Nung bumaba sa pwesto si Duterte, kasi tapos na yung termino niya, malaki talaga yung nautang ng Pilipinas. At dahil rin naman yun sa naitulong sa atin na mga mamamayan. Hindi lahat, pero talagang tinulungan tayo para makabangon. Sad to say, maraming mga namatay and wala tayong magagawa doon. So, isa yon sa under ng globalization. So, kung meron tayong mga positive outcome ng globalization, meron at merong negative outcome. And ito yung mga ethical challenges dala ng globalization. So, ano nga ba itong ethical challenges of globalization na to? Ethical challenges of globalization. Globalization deepen the inequalities within and between nations is ethically condemnable from both the consequentialist and deontological standpoints. So kung titignan, yung consequentialist daw and deontological standpoints, in-question niya ang globalization, ang ethics na ginagamit rito sa globalization. Bakit niya in-question? So dito kasi sa globalization, yung pinaka-roots nito is yung wealth or pera. 'Di ba ang tao pag nasisilaw sa pera, nag-iiba yung paningin. Sarili lang yung iniisip niya, o sabihin na nating selfish, greedy. Yun yung nangyayari dito sa globalization. Kaya kune-question ng consequentialist and deontological standpoints. Itong dalawa na to, ito yung ni-report ng dalawang group. Hindi ko alam kung anong grupo sila, pero ito yung ni-report nila. So, kung magtatanong sana ako, pero i-explain ko na lang. So, bakit kune-question ng consequentialism and deontological ang globalization? So, sa consequentialism, alam naman natin nakadepende ito sa consequences. Kung alam mong negative yung consequence, hindi mo nagagawin. Dito sa globalization, hindi. Wala silang pake sa consequences na mangyayari. Basta benefit sa kanila, okay na yon. So, para sa consequentialism, globalization fails to maximize happiness for the greatest number of people. Kadalasan kasi sa globalization, para lang to sa mga mayayaman para lang to sa mga developed country. For example, yung China. Alam naman natin yung China is isa sa mga developed country. Pero isa rin sa merong mga mamamayan na merong mahihirap. Pinakamahirap talaga. Meron silang ganun. Wala na silang paki doon. Basta yung bansa is umaangat. Okay lang na maraming mahihirap. Kasi hindi naman yung mahihirap yung hihila sa mga mamayaman pababa Kundi habang tumataas yung mga mayayaman, yung mga mahihirap, bumababa. Ano yung pinaka-best example dyan? Yung mga product. Kung titignan nyo, pamahal yung mga bilihin. Pero sa mga mayayaman, okay lang yan. Kasi habang tumatagal, tumataas yung sweldo nila. And syempre, yung pagmahal ng mga presyo, ganun pa rin constant pa rin yung labas nila ng pera. Kasi tumaas nga yung sweldo nila, tinapatan lang nila yung mataas na presyo. Yung mahihirap, hindi. Kung ano yung sweldo mo na yon. So, pag nagtaas yung mga bilihin, ikaw, talo ka. So, kung sa 1 month, yung mahihirap, hindi nila kayang bilhin yung 1 dosena para makamura. Yung mga mayayaman, kaya nilang bilhin yung 1 box para makamura sila ng ilang peso pa yan, makakamura sila. Yung mga hihirap, hindi. Yung afford lang nila is yung pangangailangan nila sa isang araw. Isang powder, isang bar ng soap, yun lang yung afford nila, which is mahal. Kasi mahal yun when you times that sa 1 month, 30 days, i-times mo yung 30 na yun sa presyo na binili mo for 1 day. Di ba mas double price kaysa dun sa gastos ng mga mayayaman? Talagang unfair yung mundo. Ito yung kine-question ng consequentialism sa globalization. Ano naman yung kine-question ng deontological standpoints? Sabi naman ng deontological, di ba ang deontological, rule-based to. So sabi niya, questionable on the account that exploited populations are treated as means to an end and no one end in themselves. So ito yung sinasabi ko. Pag yung mayaman, yung mga mayayaman na, yung mga mahihirap, mas lalong humihirap. Kasi wala silang source eh. Wala silang kakayahan na magtrabaho sila. Kaya dapat hindi natin sila sinasabihan ng magtrabaho. Hindi natin sila pwedeng sabihan ng magtrabaho ka kasi, tapos magtipid ka, samantalang kamote na nga lang yung kinakain nila, tapos sasabihan mo pa ng ganun. Kung sa tipiran pa naman, tipid na sila. Kaya yung sinabi ni, sino ba yun na Villar, sinabi niya na magtiyaga sa kamote, talagang kamote naman talaga yung pamahawon, tanghalian, di ba nagbikol na ako? Basta yun, kaya parang nakaka-offend naman yun para sa kanila. So, yun yung dahilan bakit ko na-question ng consequentialism and deontological. So, next is, sabi rito, the presently unfolding neoliberal globalization is that concentrates wealth in hands of a few, leaving the majority in the condition of property. So, ano nga ba yung neoliberal? Sabi rito, ang neoliberalism, a policy model that encompasses both politics and economics and seeks to transfer the control of economic factors from the public sector to the private sector. Ito yung kabaliktaran to ng sinabi ni Laika during their presentation about utilitarianism. Kung sa utilitarianism, yung private sector turns yun into public sector para lahat maka-benefits. Dito, kabaliktaran. Yung mga public sector na yan, turns to private sector. So, yung mga confidential fund na yan, ang mga sinasabi nila, parang ganito yun. Confidential fund, bakit nagiging confidential? Karapatan ng mga mamamayan, malaman, kasi tax nila yun eh. So, parang ganun yung nangyayari dito sa second sentence. So, kung titignan dito ang ethics dito sa globalization, 'di ba sabi natin, morality is about sharing resources. Ethical standard is about making everybody equally happy and satisfied with their lives. But under globalization, it promotes greed and selfishness. So, sa mga susunod na presenter, itatakal nila yung mga challenges na talaga specifically. Kasi itong sinabi ko is parang broad pa siya. Wherein basta nagpapakita yung globalization ng mga challenges na nagiging unethical behavior na.
Okay, hi everyone, this is Ian, and now let's talk about labor standards as an ethical issue of globalization. We all know that globalization has brought a lot of positive impacts or opportunities for business owners, companies, and any entity that experience its positive sides. However, globalization also has its negative one. And it's an example for this is when it comes to labor standards, which has ethical issues like sweatshops, child labor, unfair wages, discrimination, unsafe working conditions, and lack of job security. Now, what are sweatshops? So basically, sweatshops, you can consider them as like factories where the working environment is very poor. When we say very poor, maybe it's unsafe. Workers are exposed to hazardous materials or substances, and they are also subjected to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, and yet they may not have access to basic human rights, insurance, or any benefits. And also, the workers for sweatshops are work for long hours, and yet they are paid less than minimum wage, or if they're lucky, they be paid just the minimum wage. Sweatshops were born from the idea of offshoring or offshore. When we say offshoring, a company from a foreign country will expand or build a factory in another country which the labor cost is low or very low compared to theirs. In that way, they could maximize their profit by minimizing the labor cost, or in simple or in simple ways or simple words, there are no benefits or no insurance, no other compensation for the employee except their salaries, and it's really morally wrong or unethical, and the workers won't can't change it because because globalization also sets standards that for a person to gain or to have a decent job or high salary paying job, you need to have a degree, and most of these employees for sweatshops, they don't. For the next labor issue of globalization, we have child labor. I think all of us knows what child labor is. Child labor basically is any type of work or any job which involves children that may be forced to work long hours for any reason or any reason, and being denied access to education and the other basic rights. Now, why is child labor considered unethical? Working in factories at a young age due to poverty and being exposed to heavy tasks or works which sometimes deal with hazardous chemicals or substances is actually or really morally wrong. And children who are exposed to labor at a young age are often deprived of access to education, which can have significant negative impacts on their future prospects. So, I think we could conclude or we could say from this point that child labor as a result of globalization is really unethical. It's an issue when it comes to ethics or when it comes to the ethical side of globalization. The next is unfair wages. So this ethical issue can also be compared with the sweatshops. Uh, Only when it comes to the idea of wages, because the difference between unfair wages and sweatshops is that unfair wages can be applied to high paying jobs. However, the sweatshops cannot. Now, let's say for example, a job or job A is present, or job A is at two different countries. The job description is the same, the the type of workload, anything, it's all the same. However, the salary is not. It's different. This happens because of mainly the economic status of the country they're in, and we can't do anything to change that because globalization has brought different levels of growth to every country. So we can't do to change it as of the moment. We just need to accept it. It's unethical, yes. It's wrong because the people the employer have both have degrees, the same level, the same education, they both receive the same experience. However, the income or the salary rates are just unfair.
Discrimination is the unfair or prejudicial treatment of people and groups based on characteristics such as race, gender, age, or sexual orientation. That's the simple answer, but explaining why it happens is much more complicated. The human brain naturally puts things in categories to make sense of the world. Very young children quickly learn the difference between boys and girls, for instance, but the values we place on different categories are learned from our parents, peers, and the observation we make about how the world works. Often, discrimination stems from fear and misunderstanding. So, in application of this to the globalization, people tend to get discriminated or somehow to be excluded into some activities, including occupations of these people. We can already see those proofs in documentations all over the world, and what we can actually do for this type of a labor dilemma is to focus on the equality and for the acceptance to these people. Just a minimization, but it is not promising that it can end, or it will not be something that can be changeable to the world. Hi, this is Rod, and I am going to discuss the last two labor dilemmas in this report. So, first, I will discuss the unsafe working conditions. So, it is stated that in some cases, companies may not provide safe working conditions for their employees. This can result in workplace injuries or even fatalities. So, unsafe working conditions just really refers to the environment where it is unstable for employees to work on. And it's like in a case where these employees, whether they want it or not, they will force themselves to work in unsafe places just to earn and to get the chance to work in such places, and may result, as mentioned into the PowerPoint, is that it may result in injuries and fatalities. One of the examples are mentioned in this slide, which is the exposure to asbestos. So, asbestos was commonly used in the construction of buildings from the 1940s to the 1980s, particularly to insulation roofing shingles and siding. So, in that case, despite its exposure to the environment and to the people who continues to work on places with such material, these people, or somehow the employee, still proceeds to work on that particular place just to earn money. So we can already see the point of the unsafe working condition in that situation, wherein employees will continue to risk themselves on unsafe working conditions just for them to earn. So one kind of a issue to the world that is still intact today, isn't it? Next is we have the lack of job security. So many companies rely on temporary or contract workers to save on costs. This can result in lack of job securities for workers who may not have access to benefits such as healthcare or retirement plans. Lack of job security is a significant ethical issue that affects workers around the world. So, lack of job security is the overall concern about the continued existence of a job in the future. This could be because of the nature of one's employment. Those who are working seasonal, temporary, and part time jobs, as well as contractual and freelance workers, may feel job insecurity more strongly than those who have full time permanent jobs. It could also be due to many other things. It could be shifting economy, a changing market, or what we are experiencing right now, which is an ongoing pandemic, and we're hearing about layoffs, downsizing, outsourcing, or even company closures right now in industries we never thought would be unstable. So, what are the reasons why lack of job security is considered unethical? So, the first reason stated here is that first, it can lead to financial security and hardship for workers and family. So, when workers are employed in jobs that are temporary or uncertain, that may struggle them to make ends meet and may be unable to plan for their future. This can lead to stress, anxiety, and other negative impacts on their physical and mental health. Second, it's that lack of job security can lead to wider economic and social problems. So, when workers lack job security, they may be unable to invest in their education, training, or other forms of personal development that are essential for their long term well being. This can lead to a cycle of poverty, inequality, and social exclusion that can have negative impacts on wider society. Then last is that lack of job security can lead to exploitation and unfair treatment of workers. So when workers are employed in jobs that are temporary or subject to frequent layoffs, they may be less likely to speak out about poor working conditions, low pay or other issues. This can make them more vulnerable to exploitation by employers who may take advantage of their precarious employment status. So, for the overall conclusion of this labor dilemma, it is stated in this presentation that overall, these labor ethical issues highlight the need for companies to ensure that their labor practices are fair and ethical and to take responsibility for the welfare of their workers. It is also important for governments and international organizations to enforce labor laws and regulations to protect workers from exploitation and abuse. So, stated here, the overall labor dilemma, we can all say that these dilemmas are something that is still intact until today. So, what I can only say in this sort of matter is that people has to get their rights to be free from doing their work in a stable way. So it's like they should have the opportunity to work in any way they can, or in anywhere rather, so that globalization will still continue to lie on positively, and we may have a more successful future if these dilemmas could take the chance to be minimized rather.
Environmental standards. Technological progress triggered exponential growth in human ability to alter the environment. While this has countless benefits, it also raises a number of dilemmas about the use of natural resources in societies with poor environmental regulations. Basically, ang environmental standards ay mga batas or regulations or mga guidelines na need sundin para masiguro natin ang dalawang bagay. Ang maprotektahan ang environment at ang sustainable na pag-unlad ng ating ekonomiya. Malawak ang saklaw nito or kinocover ng mga issues, like ang mga issues sa hangin, tubig, basura, at ang pag-exploit sa mga natural resources. Kaso yung pag-implement nitong mga environmental standards na to is mahirap. Kasi for example, pag ang topic is ang economy at sustainable development, automatically involve ang politics or ang gobyerno, ang mga investors or businesses, and ang mga ordinaryong mamamayan. And they have to work side by side with each other para makamit yung goal natin, which is to be ethically responsible towards economic growth and sustainable development. Despite ng mga challenges, environmental standards have a significant impact on globalization. Habang tumataas ang global trade, it is increasingly important na i-ensure na ang environmental standards are consistent across different countries and regions. Failure to do so ay maaaring mag-lead to environmental degradation and public health issues, as well as unfair competition between businesses that adhere to environmental standards and those that do not. So one of the frequent international environmental dilemma is related to toxic waste. An example of this is the issue of the waste sa China, since dinadump ng other developed countries like the US yung mga basura nila sa China kasi mas mababa yung disposal cost dito, and they also have relatively low labor costs, making it cheaper to process the waste sa China instead of US. Furthermore, consumers are becoming increasingly aware of the impact that their purchases have on the environment. As a result, businesses that demonstrate a commitment to environmental standards are often more successful in the global marketplace. In this sense, environmental standards can be seen as a way to promote sustainable development while also supporting economic growth. So in conclusion, environmental standards are essential for promoting sustainable development and protecting the environment, while there are challenges associated with implementing and enforcing these standards. They play a crucial role in ensuring that globalization is sustainable and equitable.
For the third moral dilemmas of globalization, we have the human rights. So, in what way nga ba nagkakaroon ng moral dilemma ang globalization pagdating sa human rights? So, sabi dito, nagkakaroon ng moral dilemma ang globalization pagdating sa human rights is because corporations sometimes face dilemmas linked to operations in countries with governments accused of violating human rights. So basically, yung tinutukoy po dito is, 'di ba, ang globalization is simply yung pag-spread or ang exchange ng goods, services, and etc. globally. So kapag ang isang corporation, let's say na nag-offer ngayon ng isang service is nag-deal ng business sa isang country and yung country na yun is naakusahan ng paglabag sa human rights dahil sa isang bagay na ginawa nila which is involve or ginamit yung service na in-offer nung corporation sa process ng paggawa nila ng mali. Dito na nagkakaroon ng moral dilemma ang globalization. So, para mas maintindihan, andito po yung isang example. So, yung high-profile case before, which is the IBM or International Business Machines scandal of doing business with the Nazis. So, in 1930s and 1940s, itong IBM nag-provide ng Hollerith punch cards to the Third Reich, which is ginamit para sa operational management ng extermination camps or ginamit yun ng Nazis to murder Jews and on a smaller scale ng Roma. And another example, in the 1970s, yung Polaroid is nag-stop ng benta ng equipment sa government ng South Africa dahil nalaman nila na yung mga cameras is ginagamit to make IDs para sa pag-surveillance ng mga dissidents or yung mga person who strongly disagrees with and publicly criticizes a government of the official rulings of a group or organization.
Good day, everyone. I will going to report the topic cultural diversity. First, let's talk about what is cultural diversity. Cultural diversity, or also known as multiculturalism, is a group of diverse individuals from a diverse culture or societies. The term cultural diversity can also refer to having different cultures respect each other's differences. After that brief introduction about the cultural diversity, let's connect the cultural diversity in our topic, which is globalization and its ethical challenges. Principle of international law hold that corruptions ought to disrespect the customs and cultures of the communities where they operate. Traditional values can be lost to the homogenizing trends introduced by globally integrated production processes and product promotion. Sa traditional values po is dahil nga sa pagbabago ng panahon at sa dahil sa mga bagay na nauuso ngayon or yung mga trending na bagay, parang yung mga dating nakasanayan natin ay nagbabago na. Parang hindi na siya parehas ng dati dahil nga yung kapaligiran natin is parang nag-a-advance din. Parehas lamang sa mga kagamitan. Mas advanced na tayo ngayon kesa noon. Some amount of change is inevitable and certain local practices may not deserve protection if they violate important minimum global norms. However, when should a norm be respected because of a cultural diversity consideration, and when should it be ignored because it violates global minimum? A paradigmatic case occurs with gender equality. It is frequent that an anti-discrimination standard clash with traditional customs or religious practices. For example is in Western corporations which typically promote gender equality at home often find themselves operating in societies intolerant against women. Like in Saudi Arabia po is parang in Saudi Arabia gender separation is almost total and women are forbidden by law to practice many professions. Yun nga po dun sa Saudi Arabia sa culture po nila is that para ang mga babae or mga kababaihan ay limitado lang yung mga bagay or mga trabaho na pwede lang makuha. Hindi pareha sa atin na may gender equality na kahit trabaho ng lalaki is pwede na maging trabaho ng babae. Ang meaning po pala ng paradigmatic is, it is something that is an ideal or standard.
Corruption. Corruption is a concept that agglomerates practices ranging from multi-million dollar payments to high government officials to a few dollars bribe to a low-level bureaucrat. It is estimated that over $1 trillion are paid in bribes annually, which squanders public resources and deprives millions of food, education, and other government services to which they are entitled. So, one of the ethical challenges of globalization is corruption. To sum it up, globalization drives countries to share their ideas, capitals, and technology. It allows nations to invest in each other's development. So parang kapag mag-invest ka sa isang foreign country, it will lead to economic development and sometimes form mutually beneficial transactions or relationships that will create a higher standards of living para sa mga mahihirap. So, sa case ng corruption, parang ginagawang ebidensya ang korupsyon para sabihin or para masabi na ang globalization ay isang mapagsamantalang gawain or as an exploitative act or practices dahil parang hinahayaan daw ng globalization na mas lalong magpayaman ang mga mayayamang bansa at pinapahirap lang nito lalo ang mga mahihirap na bansa. Like for example, is it acceptable to bribe a low-level bureaucrat to speed up a procedure he is supposed to do anyway? Like in April 2012, it was reported that Walmart paid more than $24 million to Mexican officials to speed up permits to open new branches. Payments were made to expedite a process that officials should have executed anyway. So is $24 million a small payment for a company the size of Walmart? Since small payments are tolerated in some countries and even rationalized by the need to supplement the meager salaries earned by public officials. So kung titingnan natin sa point of view ng Walmart, since Walmart isa sa pinakakilala at pinakamalaking retailer sa buong mundo, ang $24 million sa kanila ay is just a barya lang. Pero kung titingnan natin sa point of view ng isang Mexican officials, ang $24 million is napakalaking halaga na ng pera. So even though the transaction are made in foreign country, still it will violate the corporations due to fairness at magkikreate yon ng negative impact or negative image sa culture nyo in sustaining corruption and inequality. Although the bribe occurs in a different society with a different social contract, the corporation breaches its own duty to fairness. By making a deal in a corrupt country, it places unequal burdens on the citizenry by supporting a crooked regime. If the corporation were in the position of the worst off, it would feel exploited, according to Seven Pillars Institute. The fact that deal occurred in a foreign country does not negate the immorality of the practice as the corporation knowingly committed an act it views as unfair in its own society. Even though both parties will benefit, still, it will violate the moral truth and the corporation's duty to fairness.
For the conclusion, let us first redefine what is globalization. Globalization is the sped up worldwide exchange of things, information, and human beings. That's it. Now, how does these ethical challenges appear in globalization? These ethical challenges only appears when greed, pride, and all the other negative characteristics and attributes and acts of human is added to the system. Say for example the war in Ukraine or the West Philippine Sea disputes versus China or the international companies like Apple with their mining issues that increases the destruction of the environment or the local to international companies like McDonald's and Jollibee with their issues on contractualization of workers. Now, how do we solve this problem? Globalization and its ethical issues can only be solved by globalization itself because one country cannot solve the problems of the whole world. And for us, we also have a responsibility to solving these problems. Say, for example, we have the responsibility to vote and to vote wisely, to take care of the environment, to take care of ourselves and of other people. With these small things, when compounded to a great number of people, can make an impact and alter the world.